The recent elimination of Hezbollah's leader Hassan Nasrallah by Israel has generated a wave of speculation about the broader implications for Middle East, especially the ongoing conflict between Israel and Iran. Now, despite fears of a direct confrontation between Tel Aviv and Tehran, and even the possibility of a third world war, such concerns appear exaggerated. So, currently, the conflict in the region primarily involves Israel, supported by the US mainly, and Iran's network of regional proxies, mainly the three H Hezbollah, Hamas, and Houthis, that are supported by its allies such as Russia, which in turn is supported by China. So, the dangerous bifurcation of the world order is once again obvious in the West Asian case. Now, what is in India's interest is a natural question, and I'll come back to that in a while. But returning to Middle East or West Asia, whichever way you prefer to call it, although a full scale war is unlikely, the interconnection between various theaters is also once again evident. It highlights that modern conflicts are not isolated events. The movement of weapons and financial support for proxy groups extends far beyond mere diplomatic gestures and public statements, and this reveals a deeper, more complex networks at play. So, what is the Iran's proxy role, and why does Iran even have one? Tehran's reliance on proxies has been a key strategy for wielding its influence since the 1979 Islamic Revolution. This network of proxies spans several countries, including Lebanon, Palestine, Yemen, Syria, and Iraq. These groups offer Iran a level of deniability and flexibility, allowing it to exert influence in the region without engaging directly in open conflict. This strategy has been a long standing challenge to the US and its allies and explains why Washington and allies like Riyadh support Israel's actions against them. My opinion is the current conflict will likely be escalated, but will remain confined to proxy battles and limited military escalations. Now, why do I say that? Israel's overarching goal in this conflict is not to destroy the Iranian state, but to weaken Iran's proxy network, namely Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Hezbollah is a Shia militia. It presents itself as a political party in Lebanon. Hamas is a Sunni group that claims to be a political party but also operates as a militia in Gaza. The Houthis, the most ruffian of the lot, I'd say, have destabilized Yemen for years and continue to do so in the Red Sea. All represent significant obstacles to normalization of Middle East, where, among others, several Indian interests are at stake. But this is not just a regional drama. The interconnectedness of theaters that I mentioned a little while ago is an important case in point, as these groups have received significant backing from Russia, another global power with a history of leveraging proxies. I'm sure everyone knows that Russia has used the Wagner Group, a private military company, to wield influence in Syria, support its military base there, and also in Central Africa for all kinds of illegal activities, and that has been happening for years. So I would say that Russia's support for Iran proxies, such as Hezbollah, mirrors its own strategy of using groups like the Wagner to advance its interests abroad. And that also gives a global texture to what is currently happening in West Asia. Meanwhile, India has been feeling the heat of the impact of these developments. The Red Sea, an essential maritime route for Indian trade, has become a zone of perpetual uncertainty as the Houthis have targeted non Chinese and non Russian vessels. Now, consequently, Indian ships have had to reroute around the Cape of Good Hope, leading to a 200% rise in shipping and insurance costs since the last year. Moreover, fluctuations in oil prices also remains a concern for India, even though it no longer relies on Iranian oil. For the uninitiated, it's China where more than 90% of Iranian oil actually goes. But it's beyond oil. With strategic interests in Chabahar port and the International North-South Transport Corridor, or the INSTC, which involves India along with Iran, Russia, and Central Asian countries, India is carefully watching how the situation evolves. Operational impediments to the much touted India Middle East Europe Economic Corridor, or the IMEC, are here to stay as well, which have already upended India's multi aligned connectivity aspirations at large. These concerns explain India's nuanced approach to this conflict, and rightfully so. Now, there is a disjunct between what is desirable versus what is achievable in this conflict. And in my piece, I have made a clear distinction between them. I've argued that despite these tensions, it's important to differentiate between what is desirable and what could be achievable to the relevant players. Now, even though Iran and its proxies have always vowed a complete destruction of Israel, it's mainly geopolitical theatrics. The fact is, no side wants an all out war, and neither has the capability to sustain one. But there is potential for limited military exchanges and a fear of escalation. Now, Iran, for example, is likely drawing lessons from Russia's prolonged struggle in Ukraine, where Moscow's invasion, which was initially planned as a quick victory, has turned into a costly and protracted conflict with sluggish developments in land battles, despite a full force projection by Moscow. And lest you forget, Iran has been a key supporter of Russia in this war, providing military assistance mainly through Shahed drones in lieu of Russia developing their nuclear program. The Russian experience in Ukraine has likely given Tehran a clear view of the heavy costs associated with a drawn out conflict, especially in terms of economic, financial, and military exhaustion, what I have called a systemic decapacitation. Worse, these shockwaves could result in a far greater damage to Iran's Islamic regime stemming from internal power struggles and strategic shifts. Now, if there's one thing that we know from the last 3 years, is that the most unexpected can also come true. The element of surprise has kept the world on its toes. Now, this desirable versus achievable is also true for Israel, where its most expensive military war has led to little political solution so far. And a complete eradication of these proxies doesn't really seem achievable. So, what lies ahead? There are four key assessments to consider regarding the current and future state of the conflict in Middle East. The first, Israel is expected to continue targeting Iran's network of proxies, known as the Axis of Resistance. Eliminating top leaders such as Hassan Nasrallah might buy Israel some time, but new leaders will eventually emerge, taking the place of those killed. Thus, Israel's broader strategy will likely focus on choking the financial and logistical support that sustains these terror groups. Now, this could involve targeting their sources of arms and financing, as Israel has already done by bombing sites near the Russian bases in Syria, where Hezbollah weapons were reportedly stored. As per the latest reports, Israeli tanks have moved into Syria already. Secondly, sanctioned cryptocurrency platforms like Garantex, which have been used to fund these proxies, could become key targets in this broader effort to weaken Iran's allies. Now, not many of you would know that Garantex Europe, originally established in Estonia in 2019, was founded by two Russians. One was a tech expert and the other was a politician. Now, Israel's crackdown on these cryptocurrency networks will eventually align with the US interest, at least in the short term, because they are also sanctioned by the US. Now, why do I say the short term? Because how will Donald Trump deal with the situation in West Asia if he were to come back remains uncertain at best. Now, coming to Garantex again, the thing with cryptocurrencies is that they surged in popularity because of a lack of regulation. Now, you see, regulators were still adjusting to this emerging technology, which actually allowed platforms like the Garantex to operate with minimal oversight, which means minimal control. Garantex carved out a niche by facilitating the conversion of rubles into other currencies, a service that became increasingly valuable as sanctions on Russian banks and Moscow's own capital controls imposed after the invasion of Ukraine made such conversions, quite difficult. Now, additionally, Garantex enabled foreign transfers using cryptocurrencies, which, while transparent through blockchain technology, they still allow the identities of the involved parties to remain concealed. Now, it is noteworthy that Garantex was sanctioned by the Washington based Office of Foreign Assets Control, or the OFAC, in 2022 for its role in laundering illicit cryptocurrency. The same Garantex blockchain networks have been found to finance militias such as Hamas and Hezbollah. Israel has already blocked close to 200 crypto accounts tied to funding Hamas. Reports also show that almost half of the suspected service providers dealing with terror affiliated wallets have also transacted with Garantex. Now, to weaken Hezbollah, Israel is likely to target Garantex, especially as more and more Russian weapons are unearthed in Hezbollah inventories. Why else do you think Syria has become one of the targets of Israeli strategy? Now, in all such actions, Israel is likely to get support from the US and increase pressure on Russia. However, as I stated earlier, it is unlikely that it will bring Israel into direct confrontation with Russia and will likely operate in the proxy sphere only. Yes, that is some diplomatic solace, but notwithstanding that, these actions will collectively weaken Iran, its proxies, and its allies, an outcome that will be welcomed by not just the West, but also others in the region, even if not officially. Third, there has been much discussion about the possibility of Israel directly attacking Iran's oil and nuclear facilities, which seems unlikely for several reasons. While some oil infrastructure could be targeted as a show of strength and maybe through hybrid means, completely disrupting Iran's oil production would cause global economic instability. Additionally, Israel has no interest in alienating other oil producing nations like Saudi Arabia, which also views Iran's proxy network as a threat. Regarding nuclear sites, Israel would need very strong and direct US support to carry out any significant strikes, and the Biden administration has been reluctant. And finally, the fourth point is that a ceasefire might only be expected once Israel achieves a sufficient level of that incapacitation of Iran's proxies, I mean the three H, Hezbollah, Hamas, and Houthis, and when all Israeli hostages are returned. Until then, the conflict is likely to escalate further before tensions begin to subside. In conclusion, therefore, the Middle Eastern conflict is likely to continue as a proxy war only, with Israel focusing on weakening Iran's allies, occasional show of strength regardless, unless, of course, there is a paradigm shift. Now, so far, we have not really seen any. The situation remains precarious, of course, but neither side appears willing or able to escalate the conflict into a full fledged war, keeping the region on edge but avoiding a catastrophic outcome. You see, achieving a permanent solution would require addressing more fundamental and underlying issues, such as de radicalization and a more stable two state solution. However, things seem far from being resolved in the near future and do represent a collective failure of sorts at establishing lasting peace in the Middle East. The link to my column is given in the description box with more references. I will be back to discuss how the hitherto separated security theaters are getting linked in today's complex geopolitics and what does that mean for India. Stay tuned.